Ever since President Donald Trump seated Silicon Valley's broligarchy nice and upfront in his inauguration, one thing has been crystal clear. Trump is running one of the most corrupt, shady, and grifty White Houses in US history. That said, it was no surprise then last week when Trump delivered Silicon Valley a major win, unveiling his AI action plan. Not only did the plan target quote-unquote burdensome regulations, but it also escalated Trump's fight with one of the biggest watchdogs for AI and big business, the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC. In the plan, Trump called on the FTC to back off on probes into companies' AI programs and to stand down on investigations started by the Biden administration. Of course, Trump has made it a lot easier for him to boss around what are supposed to be independent agencies ever since he and Doge went on their illegal mass firing spree. This included the purging of Democratic commissioners all across the board, including FTC commissioners Alvaro Bedoya and Rebecca Kelly Slaughter, both of whom were nominated by Biden and fired by Trump this past March. But rather than just going home and making an open-to-work LinkedIn post, Bedoya and Slaughter have spent the past several months bringing national attention to Trump's government purge. Bedoya himself has even appeared alongside Bernie Sanders and AOC at their Fight the Oligarchy tour, telling a crowd in Denver that Trump is trying to turn the FTC from a, quote, fierce corporate watchdog into little lapdogs for his golfing buddies. Joining me now to discuss Trump's illegal firings, including his own, is former FTC Commissioner Alvaro Bedoya. Thank you so much for coming on Mehdi Unfiltered.
Thank you for having me.
So you started your role as FTC Commissioner, I think, 3 years ago after being appointed by Joe Biden. Did you have ever imagined back then that even if Donald Trump was somehow re-elected in 2024, that your role would end like this as part of a what looks like an illegal mass firing scheme 3 years early?
I can't say I did. And what's more than that, I can't imagine it would have all been so open and vulgar about how it was about getting money. So we found a corporate CEO bought by Exxon, oil company CEO, who was openly colluding with OPEC. And we banned him from the board of Exxon. His son maxes out to the RNC, and there's a change in administration. And guess who? Well, we banned him from that board. And as soon as the next administration comes in, he's allowed to join the Exxon board. It's that kind of naked, open corruption that we're seeing, and I would have never predicted it.
The White House, of course, defended Trump's firing of you and your colleague Rebecca Slaughter back in March, saying, quote, the time was right to let these people go. Is that reasonable grounds to dismiss someone in your position? How do they justify it to you when they let you go?
So I was standing in my daughter's gymnastics class, and I got a call from my colleague saying, hey, check out the email. There were no reasons in the email, because there was no reason other than we were inconvenient for the president's agenda to enrich his billionaire friends. One really important thing for your viewers to know is a lot of folks get fired all the time, and sometimes people hear about our firings and say, big deal, right? But we don't define the terms of our jobs. Congress did in 1914, and in order to protect our agency against this kind of corrupt influence, they said we could only be removed for basically malfeasance, fraud, neglect of duty, that kind of thing. But there was no allegation of that sort because we hadn't engaged.
So they didn't even bother to kind of make something up to say, hey, it's malfeasance, that's why we're getting rid of you.
What's more, Mehdi, they went out of their way not to say anything so that when it went to their Supreme Court, I think their hope is that the Supreme Court rubber stamp and say, no, you don't need to give a reason. The president's in charge.
Has it gone to the Supreme Court?
Not yet. It's currently before the Court of Appeals.
You've taken legal action, you and Rebecca Slaughter?
Yes, and we won in the district court, but that is stayed right now in the Court of Appeals.
They don't like district courts, as they made it very clear.
That's right.
When you two were both fired, the FTC chairman, Andrew Ferguson, who was appointed by Trump in February, responded by saying he had, quote, no doubt about his constitutional authority to remove commissioners. But interestingly enough, less than 2 years before, during his own confirmation hearing for FTC commissioner, Ferguson told Congress that he would abide by a case called Humphrey versus US, which bars the president from firing FTC commissioners. Right. I mean, to go back to your point, it's brazen here.
Yeah.
They're not hiding the fact that this is all BS. Liking this video? Then don't just watch, hit like, share, and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
Yes, and you're exactly right. He thought one thing 2 years ago, and now when it's convenient for him to think another, he believes in that full-heartedly. This is what's happening in D.C. We are quickly discovering who in the right is there to enforce the law. And we do have some folks. In fact, 2 law enforcers were just kicked out of DOJ for refusing to abide by a clearly anti-competitive merger. And the other folks are going along with it. So one of the newest commissioners to the FTC, he was asked in his confirmation hearing by Senator Tammy Duckworth, and everyone should watch this video, if the president asks you to do something illegal, will you follow that order? And he could not bring himself to say the word no.
Yeah.
That is the kind of fealty we're starting to see. We're starting to see who's there to promote themselves and who's there to follow the law.
I haven't seen that particular hearing, but I've seen a lot of hearings of Trump appointees, including Hegseth, the defense secretary, where they are asked, would you follow an illegal order from the president? They just say, well, we don't accept the premise of your question. Donald J. Trump would never ask me to do anything illegal, even though, of course,
who heard of it?
The former acting defense secretary was told to shoot people in the legs. During the first few months of this administration, you had, before you were ejected, you had a couple of very public spats with the Trump FTC chair, Andrew Ferguson. You responded to his memos on DEI initiatives, for example, with very critical reply all emails to everyone in the agency. You criticized him on social media, then you were fired. Do you worry that your firing was about the Trump administration making an example of you, trying to tell people in these agencies, don't say anything or you will be gone?
I don't know why it was, but I know who it helps. I see how disgraced oil executives who are caught colluding with OPEC can suddenly join the board of the largest oil company. I see how we were suing Mark Zuckerberg for his acquisitions of Insta and WhatsApp, and suddenly Mark Zuckerberg pays $23 million to the presidential library, and he has Oval Office meetings where he can lobby the president to drop that lawsuit against him. And so I don't know why I was fired, but I know that it helps the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world and the oil executives of the world to do whatever they want.
Just to clarify, the FTC lawsuit against Meta is still in place, right?
It
hasn't
is
been
still
dropped
in place.
yet.
It is
but
still
he's
in
lobbying
place.
hard.
And the current chair has said that if the president tells me to drop the lawsuit, I will drop the lawsuit.
It's funny because I remember a time when conservatives hated big tech and Meta. But now suddenly when they turn up to the inauguration and make donations, they're all friends. In the wake of your firing, you accused Trump of trying to turn the FTC from a, quote, fierce corporate watchdog into, quote, little lapdogs for his golfing buddies. What does that look like at the FTC in practical terms? You mentioned the oil executive. Are there other examples that we're seeing already?
Absolutely. So we brought a case against Pepsi. So there are certain brands.
But it doesn't taste as good as Coke.
Well, we're going to stay silent on that.
Just kidding.
But yeah, anyway, so it's really important for a grocery store to have certain name brand goods. And the Pepsi family of products is a big family of products. And what we found was that Pepsi would provide all these special promotional, end caps to these aisles, all these other services to the big box stores, but deny them to the smaller mom and pop competitors. And Mehdi, you might be hearing me and saying, how is this a big deal? Go talk to the family grocer on the corner and ask them about this. And they will give you story after story. Your corner liquor store will say, oh yeah, no, I have to go pick up my goods from the warehouse at 7 a.m., but the guy down the block, Total Wine and More, gets it delivered on site free and clear. We brought this lawsuit. Pepsi cut a $500,000 check for the inauguration. Lawsuit is now gone, right? And I also asked myself what's going to happen with our lawsuit against Amazon. So Amazon rips off small business sellers. It's a monopoly. You got to be on the site. It charges people 50 cents of every dollar that they make on the site. And it actually polices websites to see if you're selling your goods for lower. Big sin that would be. And then it will kick you off. And that's a lawsuit, if they discover that, that's a lawsuit that's pending right now. And hey,
I'm sure Jeff Bezos being in the inauguration won't hurt him in any way.
Yes.
Last week, the Trump administration handed Silicon Valley a huge win, as I mentioned in the intro. Not only did they call on the FTC to show more restraint in their AI probes, but they also asked the agency to essentially stand down on the AI cases started during the Biden administration. How worried are you about that with the artificial intelligence breakthroughs that are happening, with the debate about regulation versus non-regulation? What role should the FTC be having in AI? And how worried are you about Trump going all in on kind of AI?
Let's bring this down to earth, because a lot of times when people talk about AI, it just sounds like cool stuff is happening that's really cool.
Or Terminator 2.
Why would you, or Terminator 2, but let's actually bring it down to nuts and bolts. The biggest AI case we brought at the FTC was not against OpenAI or one of these other, oligarch companies. It was against Rite Aid Pharmacy. What was Rite Aid doing? People were walking into their stores. Rite Aid was secretly scanning their faces and deciding whether or not they were a shoplifter based on a list from who knows where. And because the technology did not work, they were flagging 11-year-old girls who were not shoplifters, who'd never set foot in their stores as shoplifters, basically arresting them in the store and kicking them out. They were doing the same to all sorts of people. And you don't go to the pharmacy, to buy toys. You go there to buy medicine. And so we shut that down. So this is the kind of investigation that'll be stopped because of this initiative.
And while they're stopping these investigations, they're opening other ones. Should the FTC be taking part in America's culture wars? There's now an inquiry into whether healthcare providers are failing to properly disclose the medical risks associated with gender-affirming care, which is a legitimate health debate, but what's the FTC's role in that?
Nothing. It is nothing. We have no full-time doctors on staff at the FTC. We certainly have no full-time endocrinologists or pediatric endocrinologists. The idea that the FTC would be capacitated to conduct these investigations is BS. And this is a trend I'm glad you're highlighting, because you can't be a trust buster and a culture warrior at the same time. And yet that's exactly what the leaders of this agency are now doing. This is an agency that could, with a flick of a pen, look into the price of eggs, look into the price of all sorts of consumer goods. And yet the new chairman of this agency spent his first month in office banning DEI, tweeting about it, complaining that a certain author's anti-trans books were not on Amazon, and doing that kind of thing.
Meanwhile, billionaires are getting away with all sorts of stuff. Just on that note, we talk about culture wars. One of the big culture wars, which is also an economic issue, of course, is immigration for this administration. They have launched mass deportation campaigns. They are cracking down on people coming into the country, not just illegally, but legally. Where should the FTC sit on that issue? Where, not just the FTC, but where should progressives, liberals, the Democratic Party, how should they approach this issue of immigration from a trust-busting perspective, from a regulatory perspective? Because you may have seen, a few people have seen, I did a debate recently with a bunch of far-right folks on YouTube, and one of them was very obsessed with the idea of, immigrants are a threat to low-wage Americans and to working-class Americans, and that's the real threat, not the employers.
One of the last meetings I had as an FTC commissioner was in Little Havana. It was 8 o'clock, like early April. It was already like 80, 85 degrees when I showed up. And all the guys who build the new skyscrapers for the Jeff Bezos and the billionaire hedge fund managers of the world started trickling in. And I sat around a table and I talked to them about their problems, and I thought they were going to say, yeah, we don't get overtime, which they don't. Yeah, we don't get unemployment insurance, which they don't. We don't get workers' comp. The number one complaint they said is we don't get water. We don't get water. We're working in 100-degree heat, and literally every 10 or 15 days, one of us dies. And so what I want folks who are looking at what's happening with immigration and who are supportive of what's happening, I want you to ask yourself, who is getting rich? Is it the guys who are dying literally of thirst and heat in Miami? Or is it the billionaire developer who's toasting with wine and steak his latest development? And what's more, if you kick those guys out of the country, you think those developers are suddenly going to start W-2ing their employees and paying them overtime and unemployment insurance? No. And here's the other thing I want folks to think about. Picture in your head how people who overstay their visas are now treated. And everyone has that picture, right? I want you to know that when billionaire CEOs break the law, even under the most aggressive administration, and we were blessed to have Chair Lina Khan in the last FTC who cut no one any breaks based on how powerful or wealthy they were. Even then, if a billionaire company breaks the law, they get an angry letter asking for documents. They get 3 p.m. Zoom calls to discuss how the company broke the law. They get meeting after meeting between their lawyers and ours to discuss whether we should sue them, all before we should sue them. And contrast that to the mom getting pulled into the road holding her baby's bottle, right? That's the difference between how we treat billionaire lawbreakers and regular people who made a mistake.
So, what about the Democratic Party? Why do they rely on sternly worded letters when it comes to billionaire lawbreakers? What should the Democratic Party be doing more on this issue?
I think they need to stop listening to their own oligarchs. In the last administration, you had Reid Hoffman persuade Vice President Harris not to renew the term of Lina Khan, who was actually one of the few Biden officials
Was that confirmed before the election? I can't remember.
Oh, yes.
She was never going to be the FTC chair under Harris presidency.
She refused to commit to it, and she had surrogates go out and publicly
Yes, Mark
refuse.
Cuban, I think, was one of them.
And also Governor Westmore of Maryland did this. And so what I would say is what they should start doing is stop looking at the world as much as left versus right, because those brands are degraded. We just found out that poll recently about the Democrats, at least, and start looking at it as the billionaires at the top versus everyone else. And I'll tell you,
take a more populist approach.
absolutely. And we have the laws we enforce. We have laws that let us break up big tech. We have laws that let us break up the health insurance companies, thanks to a coalition of farmers, workers, and small businesses. This is the coalition, at least with small businesses, that Zohran Mamdani tapped into in New York City. He brought those folks into the fold. Those are the coalitions we should try to focus on and revive.
Just on that note about the Harris campaign, you served under former FTC chair Lina Khan, who a lot of big tech and big corporations were not fans of. She became a hero to the populist left. Did the Democrats make a mistake not trumpeting her achievements at the FTC in bringing down prices, in going after cartels, and helping consumers get their money back in last year's election? Because instead we saw Kamala Harris campaigning with Mark Cuban and Liz Cheney. I didn't see her on the campaign trail with Lina Khan. I saw AOC do an event with Lina Khan in her constituency. But I didn't see Lina Khan or your work at the FTC elevated in campaign ads. This is what we've done to crack down on big business.
That's right. The best thing about Chair Khan is that she doesn't care what people think about her in Aspen or Sun Valley or Davos. You know, she walks into a room of corn growers in Iowa or grocers in Salt Lake or, you know, carpenters in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, and people like what she's doing. And it baffles me that this choice was made not to lift it up. And I will also add, you know, I'm a progressive, I'm a populist. I think a lot of people on the left literally look at Donald Trump and they don't understand how he got elected. I'm sure you've had these conversations where people say, I don't get it. I don't get how they could have elected him. And I think it boils down to this. When he was talking about, you know, China and illegals, we hear xenophobia. A lot of people, including a majority of Latino men, heard it and said, yeah, this guy's crazy, but he's talking about how I'm going to be able to make rent. We had that story in the Democratic Party. We had it in the leadership of Chair Khan, the work the FTC did, the work Rohit Chopra did at CFPB. People were getting ripped off on the terms of their mobile homes. And none of that was talked about to the degree that it should have been. We had those stories. We didn't tell those stories. It was a mistake.
And instead, we got Donald Trump, the fake populist, who is now dismantling the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, dismantling the FTC that you were part of, and screwing over those Latino men who put their faith in him. And Democrats gave him an open road to do that.
I think they did, unfortunately.
Alvaro Bedoya, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on Mehdi Unfiltered.
Thank you for having me.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zateo.com. Your support matters.